first light of dawn breaks across the Valyrian peninsula, not with gentle golden rays, but with the crimson glow of 14 volcanic peaks simultaneously exhaling their eternal breath of fire and smoke into the awakening sky. This is no ordinary sunrise in no ordinary city. The capital of the Freehold rises from its island, perches across a vast volcanic lake, its impossible towers spiraling upward in defiance of natural law, their surfaces already beginning to shimmer with the magical luminescence that requires no oil, no flame, no human tending to sustain its perpetual glow. The air itself carries a peculiar quality here, thick with heat even in the coolest hours before dawn, tinged with the sulfurous perfume of volcanic gases that would choke visitors from distant lands, but serves as familiar comfort to those born beneath the shadow of the 14 flames. Through this haze, the city emerges like a vision from fever dreams, its architecture flowing in curves and spirals that seem more grown than built, as if the very stone had been coaxed into impossible shapes through whispered persuasion rather than chisel and hammer. From the highest towers of the Dragonlord estates, sentries who have maintained their vigil through the long night can see the full majesty of the Freehold spreading before them. The city sprawls across more than a dozen islands, each connected by bridges that arc across the steaming waters of the volcanic lake with such grace and daring that they appear fragile as spider silk, though each could support the weight of 100 mounted knights riding abreast. Some bridges rise so high that clouds drift beneath their spans, while others sweep so low that spray from the lake's heated waters constantly mists their surfaces, creating rainbows that dance in the growing light. The lake itself never truly rests. Its waters, heated by the volcanic forces beneath, send constant plumes of steam rising into the air, creating a perpetual mist that hangs over the lower city like a gauze veil. In places where the volcanic heat concentrates most intensely, the water actually boils, creating churning cauldrons that no vessel would dare approach. Yet the Valyrians have learned to harness even this danger, directing the steam through cunningly designed channels that heat their bathhouses, warm their homes, and power mechanical devices whose purposes remain mysterious to modern scholars examining the ruins. As dawn strengthens, the city's magical illumination begins its daily transformation. The buildings themselves seem to breathe with inner light, the intensity of their glow diminishing as natural sunlight increases, maintaining perfect balance between magical and natural illumination. This is no simple enchantment, but a sophisticated working that has endured for thousands of years, adjusted and refined by generations of fire mages until it operates with the reliability of a beating heart. The light shifts in color throughout the day, following subtle patterns that mark the hours more precisely than any water clock or sundial. The streets begin to stir with the first movements of the city's awakening. Slaves emerge from their quarters in the lower districts, faces already glistening with sweat in the volcanic heat as they begin their daily labors. These are the invisible hands that keep the Freehold functioning, the masses whose suffering and toil sustain the magnificence of dragonlord civilization. Some carry water jugs balanced on their heads, making their way to the public fountains that flow with water drawn from mountain springs miles away. Others shoulder tools for construction, repair, and maintenance of the endless projects that occupy the city's attention. The slave gangs heading toward the harbor districts move in long columns, their chains clinking rhythmically as overseers crack whips to maintain proper pace. These unfortunates will spend their day loading and unloading the merchant ships that arrive from every corner of the known world, bringing tribute, trade goods, and more slaves to feed the Freehold's insatiable appetite for luxury and labor. Their backs already bear the scars of previous days, previous years, entire lifetimes of service to masters who view them as little more than beasts of burden, with the convenient ability to understand commands. But there is another class of early risers whose movements carry entirely different significance. The Dragon Keepers, easily identified by their distinctive leather garments, reinforced with bronze scales, and the long poles they carry for managing their enormous charges, make their way toward the great Dragonpit that dominates the largest central island. These men and women, though not themselves of dragonlord blood, hold positions of immense responsibility and considerable status within Valyrian society. The care and management of dragons requires knowledge passed down through generations of apprenticeship, skills that cannot be learned from books or intuited through casual observation. The Dragonpit looms ahead of them, a structure so massive that it creates its own weather patterns, its heated interior causing air to rise and cool, forming clouds that perpetually hover above its peaked roof. The building's entrance, large enough that 3 dragons could enter abreast without their wingtips touching the frame, stands open to the morning air. From within comes a symphony of sounds that would terrify anyone unfamiliar with dragons. The rumbling breaths of sleeping beasts, each exhalation like distant thunder. The scrape of enormous claws on stone as some early risers shift their positions. The occasional piercing shriek as younger dragons quarrel over sleeping spots or dream of conflicts only they can understand. The senior dragon keeper, a weathered woman whose scars tell stories of decades spent in close proximity to creatures that could incinerate her with a careless sneeze, pauses at the threshold to offer the traditional prayer to her charges. The words are in High Valyrian, the pure language from which all modern dialects descend, and they acknowledge the dragons as living embodiments of Valyria's power and glory. She touches her forehead, her lips, and her heart in sequence, then crosses the threshold into the domain of fire made flesh. Inside the dragon pit, the scale of everything expands beyond human proportion. The ceiling soars 200 feet overhead, its surface blackened by centuries of dragon fire, yet showing no sign of structural damage. The Valyrians who designed this place understood their subjects well, incorporating materials and enchantments that could withstand temperatures that would reduce ordinary stone to flowing slag. The floor, worn smooth by the passage of countless clawed feet, descends in terraced levels, creating separate spaces for dragons of different sizes and temperaments. The largest chambers, reserved for the ancient beasts who have served House Baleris, House Coharis, and other prestigious families for generations, occupy the lowest and most spacious level. Here rest dragons whose names are legend throughout the known world, creatures of such size and power that they venture forth only for the most significant military campaigns or ceremonial occasions. One such beast, a monstrous black dragon named Terax the Dread, slowly opens eyes like pools of molten gold as the keepers approach. Each eye is larger than a wagon wheel, and the intelligence that gleams within them reminds all who see them that dragons are no mere animals, but something far more ancient and knowing. The feeding of such creatures represents a logistical challenge that requires careful planning and considerable resources. Terax alone consumes the equivalent of 20 oxen per week, and that is merely to maintain his weight, not to fuel the explosive growth of youth or prepare for extended military campaigns. The keepers have already prepared this morning's meal, a collection of slaughtered cattle, pigs, and sheep piled in the feeding chamber adjacent to Tarax's sleeping area. The smell of blood hangs heavy in the warm air, and the dragon's nostrils flare as he catches the scent, a rumble of anticipation building in his chest that sounds like boulders grinding together deep underground. But even this ancient beast must wait his turn according to the established hierarchy. The dragon keepers follow strict protocols developed over millennia, protocols that maintain order and prevent the chaos that would result if dozens of hungry dragons all attempted to feed simultaneously. The youngest dragons eat first, their smaller size and more volatile temperaments making them dangerous if kept waiting too long. Then the middle generation, the war dragons in their prime, who serve as the backbone of Valyria's military might. Only when these have been satisfied do the elder dragons receive their due, though none would dare suggest this represents any lack of respect. The keeper assigned to the hatchlings makes her way to the nursery chambers, where this season's newly emerged dragons await their morning meal. These creatures, barely larger than hunting hounds and still possessing the uncertain coordination of extreme youth, nonetheless display all the essential characteristics of their species. Their scales, which will darken and harden with age, currently shimmer with an almost iridescent quality, and their eyes contain the same unnerving intelligence that characterizes their ancient relatives. The hatchling keeper carries chunks of raw meat small enough for their developing jaws, approaching each dragon individually to ensure it receives adequate nutrition. The bonding between dragon and rider begins even before hatching, when pregnant dragonlords spend time near the eggs, singing to them in High Valyrian, allowing them to become familiar with the voices and scents of the family they will serve. After hatching, young dragonlords, often children themselves, visit the hatchlings daily, feeding them by hand, sleeping near their cribs, creating the mystical connection that will endure until death separates rider from mount. This morning, several such children accompany the keepers, their fine clothes protected by leather aprons as they offer meat to dragons who might someday carry them into battle or across oceans to distant lands. One particular child, a boy of perhaps 8 years bearing the distinctive silver gold hair and purple eyes of pure Valyrian blood, kneels before a bronze-colored hatchling with unusual patience and focus. This is his dragon, chosen for him before birth according to ancient customs and prophetic dreams. The boy whispers constantly to the creature as it feeds, his words too soft for others to hear, but the dragon's attention never wavers from its young master. Already the bond is forming, that inexplicable connection that transcends normal animal training to become something approaching telepathy, allowing rider and mount to anticipate each other's intentions and respond with preternatural coordination. As the feeding proceeds through its established rhythms, other aspects of dragon care demand attention. The scales of adult dragons require regular inspection for parasites, injuries, or signs of disease. Dragon keepers armed with long-handled brushes and buckets of special oils climb scaffolding that has been erected beside sleeping dragons, carefully working the oil into the spaces between scales where irritation most commonly develops. The dragons tolerate this attention with varying degrees of patience, some remaining perfectly still, while others shift restlessly, requiring the keepers to pause their work until the beast settles once more. The morning feeding and grooming will consume several hours, but the dragon keepers know that their charges represent the foundation of Valyrian power and prosperity. Without dragons, the Freehold would be merely one civilization among many, forced to compete on equal terms with kingdoms that possess larger populations or richer resources. With dragons, Valyria commands the skies and the fears of every potential enemy, maintaining an empire that stretches from the Rhoyne to the Summer Sea and beyond. The careful attention lavished on these creatures, though demanding and often dangerous work, secures the continued dominance that has endured for thousands of years. While the dragon keepers tend to their charges in the Dragonpit, the noble households of the upper city begin their own elaborate morning rituals. The estate of House Targaryen, though not the largest or most prestigious of the dragonlord families, nonetheless exemplifies the refined luxury that characterizes Valyrian aristocratic life. The main residence, built on one of the highest islands to catch the cooling breezes that sometimes drift down from the mountains, sprawls across several acres of carefully sculpted gardens, where exotic plants from throughout the known world bloom in profusion. The lord of the house, Daemon Targaryen, awakens not to the call of servants, but to the soft chiming of musical crystals suspended near his window, their tones activated by the changing light as dawn progresses. His sleeping chamber, vast enough to house an entire peasant family with room to spare, features walls carved from single pieces of pale stone that seem to glow with their own inner radiance. The bed itself rests on a platform elevated 3 feet above the floor, its mattress stuffed with down from swans that nest in the gardens of the summer palace, its silken sheets woven by the finest craftsmen in lace. Daemon's first conscious act each morning involves a ritual older than the Freehold itself. He rises naked from his bed and walks to the eastern window, where the dawn light now streams with increasing intensity. Standing in this light, he recites the prayer of awakening in High Valyrian, thanking his ancestors for another day of life and pledging to uphold the honor and power of his bloodline. The prayer's words have been passed down unchanged for thousands of years, connecting him to every previous lord of House Targaryen, stretching back to the shadowy centuries when the family first claimed dragons and began their ascent from obscurity. Only after completing this private ritual does Daemon summon his body servants, a matched pair of slaves from the Summer Islands, whose dark skin creates striking contrast with the pale stone of the chamber. These individuals, purchased at enormous expense and trained for years in the specific preferences and requirements of their master, attend to his morning ablutions with practiced efficiency. They lead him to the bathing chamber, where water heated by volcanic forces fills a sunken pool large enough for swimming. The water contains minerals and salts that maintain its clarity while providing therapeutic benefits to skin and muscle. As Daemon soaks in the heated pool, his slaves use pumice stones and scented oils to cleanse and invigorate his body. The morning bath represents not mere hygiene, but a sacred preparation for the day ahead, washing away the vulnerability of sleep and the contamination of dreams to restore the purity of waking consciousness. The slaves work in silence, their movements synchronized through long practice, and Daemon closes his eyes, allowing his mind to drift across the challenges and opportunities the day may present. Meanwhile, in another wing of the estate, Daemon's daughter, Daenerys, undergoes her own morning preparations under the supervision of female slaves and the watchful eye of her mother. The girl, 14 years old, and already promised in marriage to her cousin to maintain the purity of the bloodline, represents the future of House Targaryen. Her morning routine differs from her father's in crucial ways that reflect both her gender and her special gifts. Where Gaiman bathes in heated water, Daenerys immerses herself in a pool cooled by ice brought down from mountain peaks. The shock of cold water, believed to sharpen the prophetic visions that have marked her since early childhood. The visions come to her unbidden, fragments of possible futures that intrude upon her waking thoughts and dominate her dreams. She has learned not to fear these episodes, but rather to embrace them as gifts from powers beyond mortal understanding. This morning, as the cold water closes over her head, she sees flames in darkness, cities burning, and dragons falling from ash-choked skies. The vision lasts only moments, but its intensity leaves her gasping as she surfaces, and the slave women rush forward with warming towels and concerned questions. Daenerys waves away their concern, though the vision troubles her in ways she cannot articulate even to herself. In the estate's great kitchen, a facility that rivals those of the finest inns throughout the known world, cooks and their assistants have been working since before dawn to prepare the morning meal for the family and their household. The kitchen's centerpiece, a massive hearth with multiple cooking surfaces maintained at different temperatures, allows simultaneous preparation of dozens of dishes. Unlike the common people who subsist on porridge and bread, the Dragonlord families expect meals of astonishing variety and sophistication, incorporating ingredients from across their vast empire. This morning's offerings include eggs from exotic birds raised in the estate's own aviaries, their yolks a brilliant orange that stains bread dipped into them. There are platters of delicate fish, caught that very morning in the volcanic lake, their flesh sweet and tender from the warm waters. Fruits imported from the summer isles sit alongside berries gathered from the mountain slopes, while bread fresh from the ovens releases steam when broken open. The cook, a freeman rather than a slave, samples each dish before it is sent to the dining hall, ensuring that quality meets the exacting standards expected by his employers. The morning meal becomes a gathering point for the entire household. Gaiman and his wife, his children, several cousins who have taken up temporary residence, and favored servants all assemble in the dining hall, a room whose walls feature intricate murals depicting the family's glorious history. The murals show scenes of conquest and ceremony, dragons in flight and enemies in submission, all rendered in pigments, whose colors remain vibrant despite centuries of exposure to volcanic heat and humidity. As they eat, conversation flows freely across topics ranging from politics in the assembly, to the health of the family's dragons, to the merits of various marriage alliances being considered for younger family members. But even as the nobles breakfast in luxury, the city's commercial districts have been awake and active for hours. The great marketplace of Valyria, sprawling across the lowest and largest island where it can accommodate both land and water traffic, serves as the economic heart of an empire that encompasses millions of souls and territories spanning thousands of miles. Here, merchants from every corner of the known world gather to trade in commodities ranging from mundane necessities to exotic luxuries that exist nowhere else. The slave market occupies a prominent position near the harbor, its presence a constant reminder of the foundation upon which Valyrian prosperity rests. By the time the sun has fully risen, hundreds of slaves stand on display platforms, their bodies cleaned and oiled to present them to best advantage, their potential purchasers circling like carrion birds assessing prey. The slave merchants call out the virtues of their merchandise in voices trained to carry across the crowded marketplace, describing strength and skill, docility and intelligence, as if these human beings were no different from cattle or horses being sold at auction. One particularly active slave merchant, a Valyrian who has built his fortune on supplying the Freehold with labor from the Eastern Territories, presides over a collection of recently arrived captives from the grasslands beyond the Bone Mountains. These people, taken in raids by Dothraki, who sold them to Valyrian intermediaries, stand bewildered and terrified on the auction block, understanding nothing of the language being spoken around them, knowing only that their previous lives have ended and their futures depend entirely on the whims of strangers. The merchant describes their virtues with practiced enthusiasm. The men are strong and suitable for heavy labor in mines or on construction projects. The women are young and might be trained for household service or more intimate duties. The children, though requiring investment before they can provide useful work, offer the advantage of malleability and can be shaped to any purpose their masters desire. The purchasing decisions made here will determine the fates of these individuals for the rest of their lives. Some will go to the mines beneath the 14 flames, where they will labor in darkness and heat until exhaustion or accident claims them, their bodies disposed of without ceremony. Others will enter household service, their treatment depending entirely on the temperaments of their masters, ranging from brutal to merely indifferent. A fortunate few, possessed of beauty or unusual talents, might become valued property whose owners take pride in their achievements. But all share the fundamental condition of powerlessness, existing at the mercy of a system that views them as instruments rather than individuals. Adjacent to the slave market, the merchants who trade in exotic goods display their wares with equal enthusiasm. Silks from Yi tie shimmer in the sunlight, their patterns so intricate that they seem to move and shift as the fabric drapes across display stands. Spices from the Shadowlands fill the air with competing fragrances, some pleasant and others almost overwhelming in their intensity. Amber from the north, jade from the east, ivory from the south, all accumulate in piles that represent fortunes yet seem almost commonplace in a market where wealth flows with the abundance of the volcanic springs. The Valyrian steel merchants occupy a place of particular honor in the marketplace, though their actual forges remain hidden in secure locations known only to master smiths and their most trusted apprentices. These merchants display only finished products, weapons and tools whose quality exceeds anything else in the known world by such margins that comparison becomes meaningless. A Valyrian steel sword, lightweight yet strong enough to cut through armor and lesser blades without dulling, represents an investment of years of work and skills that cannot be taught but must be learned through decades of apprenticeship. The prices demanded for such weapons would bankrupt minor lords in distant kingdoms. Yet here in Valyria, wealthy families purchase them almost casually, status symbols that proclaim both taste and resources. The morning market attracts not only professional merchants, but also common citizens seeking the necessities of daily life. Farmers from the mainland bring produce grown in volcanic soil that yields harvests of almost supernatural abundance. Fishermen display their catches, including species that exist nowhere else in the world, adapted to the warm volcanic waters through countless generations. Bakers, butchers, and brewers all ply their trades, creating a cacophony of competing voices calling out prices and extolling quality that blends with the general roar of thousands of people engaged in the eternal dance of commerce. Among the crowds move individuals whose purposes remain less obvious than simple buying and selling. Information brokers, identifiable only to those who know what signs to watch for, circulate through the marketplace gathering gossip and rumor that they will later sell to noble houses seeking advantage over their rivals. Thieves, despite the harsh penalties imposed on those caught stealing from citizens or valued slaves, prowl for opportunities among the chaos and congestion. Spies from foreign powers, disguised as merchants or travelers, observe and record details that they will report to masters in distant cities who seek any advantage in their dealings with the Freehold. Beneath the marketplace, in chambers carved from the living rock of the island itself, the true mechanisms of Valyrian commerce operate beyond the sight of casual observers. Here, representatives of the great trading houses negotiate contracts involving quantities of goods and sums of money that dwarf anything seen in the public markets above. These negotiations, conducted according to customs and protocols, refined over thousands of years, determine the flow of resources throughout the empire. A contract sealed here might send 100 ships to the Summer Isles for spices and ivory, or commission the construction of a new fleet of war galleys, or arrange the delivery of 10,000 slaves to work in the silver mines of Andalos. The negotiators employ sophisticated financial instruments that would baffle merchants from less developed civilizations. Letters of credit guaranteed by the great banking houses allow transfers of enormous sums without the need to physically transport precious metals. Insurance contracts protect against the risks of storms, piracy, and simple bad fortune that threaten any long-distance trade. Partnership agreements spread both risks and rewards among multiple investors, enabling projects too large or uncertain for any single house to undertake alone. The accumulation of these arrangements creates a financial system of remarkable complexity and efficiency that moves resources with greater speed and reliability than any previous civilization achieved. While commerce occupies the merchant classes, the true foundation of Valyrian wealth lies not in trade, but in the mines that tunnel deep beneath the 14 flames. These mines, worked by slave gangs numbering in the tens of thousands, extract not only precious metals, but also the fossilized dragon eggs that enabled the Freehold's rise from obscurity to dominance. The mining operations represent engineering achievements of staggering ambition and grim determination, pushing human endurance to its absolute limits while accepting casualty rates that would be unthinkable in free societies. The entrance to Mine 7, one of the largest and most productive operations beneath Mount Tyrios, yawns like a wound in the mountainside, wide enough to accommodate the ore wagons that emerge in constant streams throughout the day and night. The heat that escapes from this opening would be intolerable to anyone unaccustomed to volcanic conditions, but the slaves who descend into the depths each morning have no choice but to endure. They gather in their work gangs, their bodies already scarred from previous ventures into the mountain's burning heart, their eyes holding the resignation of those who know that each descent might be their last. The overseer, a brutal man who earned his position through demonstrated willingness to extract maximum productivity regardless of human cost, inspects the gangs with cold efficiency. He looks for signs of disease or injury that might compromise the day's work, pulling aside any slave who appears too weak to maintain proper pace. The fate of those removed from the work gangs depends on the overseer's judgment. Those with temporary ailments might be sent to recover, while those whose conditions seem permanent or terminal are often disposed of immediately, rather than wasted on inadequate feeding and housing. The descent into the mine follows a gradually sloping main shaft, its walls reinforced with timber frameworks that show the char and warping caused by volcanic heat. Torches mounted at regular intervals provide illumination, their flames casting dancing shadows that make the rough stone walls seem to writhe and pulse with their own malevolent life. The temperature increases steadily as the slaves descend, and soon even the minimal clothing they wear becomes soaked with sweat. The air grows thick and difficult to breathe, laden with sulfurous gases and rock dust that scratches at lungs and throat with every inhalation. At depths where no natural light penetrates, the main shaft branches into dozens of side galleries, each pursuing veins of precious metals or hunting for the dragon eggs that represent the ultimate prize of mining operations. The galleries vary wildly in height and width, some spacious enough for workers to move freely, while others require them to crawl on hands and knees through passages barely wide enough for human bodies. The stone itself radiates heat that becomes almost unbearable in the deepest passages, and slaves must pause frequently to splash themselves with water from leather bags carried for that purpose. The work of extracting ore from the surrounding rock proceeds according to methods developed over thousands of years of mining experience. Slaves armed with picks and hammers attack the rock face, breaking away chunks that other workers load into baskets or small ore carts. The physical demands of this labor, combined with the extreme heat and difficult breathing conditions, exhaust even the strongest workers within hours. Yet the overseers drive them relentlessly, knowing that replacements stand readily available in the slave markets above, and that the Freehold's appetite for precious metals and dragon eggs never diminishes. The greatest danger in the mines comes not from the brutal working conditions or the casual cruelty of overseers, but from the volcanic forces that lurk beneath the mountain. Without warning, pockets of superheated gas can erupt from newly opened passages, incinerating everyone in the vicinity before they can even cry out. Cave-ins occur with depressing regularity as the constant excavation weakens the mountain's internal structure, entombing entire work gangs beneath thousands of tons of rock. Molten rock occasionally breaks through into active galleries, flowing with the inevitability of water downhill, consuming everything in its path, while the lucky slaves in its way die instantly, and the unlucky ones linger in agony for hours or days. The discovery of a dragon egg transforms an ordinary mining operation into an event of tremendous significance. These fossilized objects, resembling stones more than eggs, nonetheless possess distinctive characteristics that experienced miners learn to recognize. When a slave uncovers one, he immediately calls for the overseer, knowing that concealing such a discovery means instant death, while reporting it might earn a small reward, or at least a brief respite from the most brutal labor. The overseer examines the find with expert eyes, verifying its authenticity before sending word to the surface through the runners who maintain communication between the depths and the entrance. The extraction of a dragon egg requires far more care than simple ore removal. These objects, though appearing stone-like, possess internal structures that can be damaged by rough handling, potentially ruining their value or their ability to eventually hatch. specialist crews descend to carefully excavate around the egg, using delicate tools and patient techniques to free it from the surrounding rock without causing harm. Once freed, the egg is wrapped in protective materials and carried to the surface with elaborate precautions, guarded by armed overseers who understand that the value of a single dragon egg exceeds the total value of 100 slaves. At the surface, the egg undergoes examination by fire mages and dragon masters who assess its condition and potential. The best eggs, those judged most likely to hatch successfully, are allocated to the dragonlord families according to complex formulas that account for family status, recent military service to the Freehold, and simple political favoritism. Lesser eggs might be sold to foreign nobles willing to pay enormous sums for the prestige of owning such objects, even though none outside the Valyrian bloodlines have ever successfully hatched one. The poorest quality eggs, damaged or deemed unlikely to ever hatch, are sometimes ground into powder for use in magical rituals or alchemical preparations. The morning's mining operations beneath the 14 flames represent merely one aspect of the vast industrial enterprise that sustains Valyrian civilization. Other mines extract copper, silver, and gold in quantities that flood the markets of the known world, depressing prices and enabling Valyrian merchants to purchase foreign goods at rates that leave their trading partners impoverished. Still, other operations pursue gemstones, particularly the fire opals that form in volcanic rock and command premium prices for their unusual beauty and supposed magical properties. The coordination required to manage these simultaneous operations across 14 different volcanic peaks represents an administrative achievement that rivals the engineering accomplishments it manages. While slaves toil beneath the mountains and merchants haggle in the marketplaces, the young nobles destined to become the next generation of dragonlords attend their own obligations in the academies and training grounds scattered throughout the upper city. The Citadel of Flame, the most prestigious institution for magical education in the known world, occupies an entire island whose buildings spiral upward in imitation of rising smoke and fire. Here, the children of dragonlord families gather to learn the arts and sciences that distinguish civilized Valyrians from the barbarians who populate the rest of the world. The morning classes begin with physical training, for the fire mages understand that magical power requires a sound vessel to contain and channel it properly. The students, ranging in age from 7 to 25, assemble in the practice yard wearing simple tunics that allow free movement while providing minimal protection from the morning heat. Their instructor, a scarred veteran whose missing eye testifies to the dangers of overconfidence with fire magic, leads them through a series of exercises designed to build strength, flexibility, and the body awareness necessary for advanced magical work. The exercises flow from one to another in patterns that recall the movements of dragons in flight, incorporating swooping arm motions, crouching transitions that mimic landing approaches, and sudden explosive extensions that echo the moment when dragons launch themselves skyward. The students perform these movements in unison, their breathing synchronized according to techniques that prepare the body to channel magical energies. The instructor circles among them, correcting postures with sharp strikes from a wooden rod, accepting no excuses for imperfect execution, regardless of the student's noble bloodlines or family connections. After physical preparation comes the theoretical study of fire magic, conducted in lecture halls, whose walls bear scorch marks from centuries of practical demonstrations and student errors. The lecturer, An ancient woman whose silver hair has been singed away in places to reveal pink scalp beneath, begins her presentation with a fundamental question that has occupied fire mages since the earliest days of the Freehold. What is the true nature of fire, and how can human consciousness influence and direct this primal force? The students, arrayed on stone benches that rise in tiers, listen with varying degrees of attention as the lecturer expounds upon theories developed over millennia of study and experimentation. Fire, she explains, represents more than simple combustion, more than the oxidation of fuel that produces heat and light. It possesses a consciousness of its own, a hunger and will that can be bargained with, persuaded, even enslaved by those who possess sufficient knowledge and power. The Valyrians did not invent fire, but learned to communicate with it, to offer it sacrifices that satisfied its appetite, while directing its energies toward purposes useful to human civilization. The practical demonstration that follows the lecture requires all students to withdraw to the far end of the hall, behind protective barriers of stone and metal that have contained countless previous conflagrations. The lecturer approaches a stone platform at the room's center, where various materials have been arranged for her demonstration. With a gesture and a word in High Valyrian, she summons fire from nothingness, flames appearing in the air above her outstretched palm without any visible fuel source. The fire hovers there, swirling and dancing, responding to subtle movements of her hand like a trained animal following its master's commands. She directs the fire toward the various materials on the platform. Wood, which bursts into ordinary flame. Stone, which begins to glow with heat but does not burn. Water, which boils and steams but extinguishes the magical fire when enough accumulates. And finally, human flesh, represented by the severed arm of an executed criminal. The flesh burns with particular intensity, the fire seeming to feed on something more than simple organic matter, consuming some essential quality that other materials lack. This demonstration, the lecturer explains, illustrates why blood magic remains the most powerful form of fire sorcery. For living essence provides fuel that inanimate materials cannot match. The students who show particular aptitude in these morning classes will eventually progress to more advanced training, learning to forge Valyrian steel, to maintain the volcanic containment spells that prevent the 14 flames from erupting catastrophically, or even to influence the behavior of dragons themselves through magical commands that supplement the natural bond between rider and mount. But such secrets remain carefully guarded, passed only to those who prove themselves worthy through years of dedicated study and absolute loyalty to the Freehold. In another section of the upper city, the forges where Valyrian steel is created operate according to rhythms known only to the master smiths and their chosen apprentices. The process of creating this legendary metal involves far more than simple metallurgy, incorporating magical rituals and sacrifices that modern knowledge cannot fully reconstruct. The forges themselves, built using techniques lost even before the Doom, maintain temperatures that would reduce ordinary metal to vapor. Yet within these infernos, the master smiths work with apparent ease, their bodies protected by enchantments that allow them to manipulate molten metal with their bare hands. The master smith Valyrian, whose family has crafted legendary blades for 8 generations, begins his day's work by examining the ingots of raw material that will be transformed into Valyrian steel. These ingots, created through preliminary processes that involve the smelting of various ores with additives whose precise nature remains a jealously guarded secret, already possess unusual properties. They are lighter than normal steel, yet denser, and they ring with a peculiar tone when struck that seems to linger in the air longer than natural sound should persist. The forging process requires the coordination of multiple smiths working in perfect synchronization, their hammers falling in rhythmic patterns that seem almost musical in their precision. Valyrian heats the ingot in his forge's heart, where flames burn with colors that do not exist in natural fire, blues and purples and shades of red that seem to contain darkness rather than light. When the metal reaches the precise temperature, known only through experience and intuition, he withdraws it and begins the hammering, each strike sending sparks flying that burn with unusual intensity before winking out. Between heating cycles, Valyrian chants in High Valyrian, words that might be prayers or spells or simply traditional formulas passed down through generations. He sprinkles the glowing metal with powders ground from dragon scales, gemstones, and substances whose origins he reveals to no one. The metal absorbs these additions, incorporating them into its structure in ways that conventional metallurgy cannot explain. When he plunges the blade into the quenching bath, the liquid within is not water, but a mixture whose precise composition represents the culmination of his family's 8 generations of experimentation and refinement. The blade that emerges from this process possesses properties that seem almost magical. It holds an edge that never dulls, cutting through armor and lesser blades with equal ease. Its weight feels perfectly balanced in the hand, regardless of the wielder's size or strength. And most remarkably, it bears a distinctive rippling pattern on its surface, waves and whirls that seem to flow and shift when viewed from different angles, creating the impression of folded metal, though no folding has occurred. Completion of a single Valyrian steel blade requires weeks of intensive work, and only a few dozen mastersmiths throughout the Freehold possess the knowledge and skill to create these weapons. The blades command prices that would purchase estates or fleets of ships, yet the demand always exceeds supply. Noble families treasure these weapons as heirlooms to be passed down through generations, while foreign kings beggar their treasuries attempting to acquire them. The mystique surrounding Valyrian steel enhances its value beyond mere utility, transforming these weapons into symbols of power and status that transcend their function as tools for killing. As midday approaches, the heat in the city becomes oppressive, even for those accustomed to volcanic conditions. The temperature in the lower districts, where stone buildings trap and reflect heat, while volcanic vents add their contributions, reaches levels that would be considered dangerous in more temperate climates. Yet the inhabitants adapt, moving more slowly, seeking shade where it can be found, accepting the discomfort as simply another aspect of daily existence in the greatest city the world has ever known. The afternoon hours bring many nobles and wealthy citizens to the bathhouses that dot the upper city. These facilities, fed by the same volcanic heating that makes the lower city unbearable, offer controlled comfort rather than overwhelming heat. The grandest bathhouse, serving the most prestigious dragonlord families, occupies a building whose architecture recalls the flowing forms of the city itself, all curves and spirals with no harsh angles to offend the eye. Within, multiple pools of varying temperatures allow bathers to customize their experience, moving between hot and cool water according to preference and therapeutic purpose. The bathhouse serves social functions that extend beyond simple cleanliness or physical comfort. Here, noble families gather to exchange information, negotiate alliances, and conduct the subtle political maneuvering that occupies much of their attention. The informal setting, where traditional markers of rank become less obvious when everyone wears minimal clothing or none at all, enables conversations that might be more difficult in formal circumstances. Yet even here, hierarchies persist. The oldest and most prestigious families occupy the best pools, while lesser nobles and wealthy freedmen make do with less desirable spaces. In the women's section of the bathhouse, separated from the men's area by walls that ensure complete privacy, the ladies of House Targaryen and their allied families gather for their own rituals of bathing and conversation. The talk flows across topics both trivial and significant. The merits of various cosmetics and perfumes, the behavior of children, and the management of households, but also more weighty matters of marriage alliances, property disputes, and the political maneuvering that determines which families rise and which fall in the endless competition for status and influence. Lady Maera Targaryen, wife to Gaemon and mother to Daenerys, reclines in a pool whose temperature has been adjusted to her precise preference, her silver gold hair piled atop her head to keep it dry. She listens more than she speaks, a practiced technique that allows her to gather information without revealing her own positions or interests. The other women, aware of her attention and seeking to curry favor with House Targaryen, share gossip and rumor with enthusiasm. A certain dragonlord family faces financial difficulties and may need to sell property. Another family's heir shows disturbing signs of the madness that sometimes afflicts those of pure Valyrian blood. A third family plans to challenge traditional precedents regarding seats in the assembly. The information gathered in these bathhouse conversations will be shared with husbands and fathers, incorporated into the vast web of knowledge that noble families maintain about each other's affairs. In a society where formal positions and titles matter less than actual power and influence, this intelligence gathering represents an essential activity that shapes decisions about alliances, enmities, and the myriad choices that determine a family's fortunes. The women who excel at this work, who can extract useful information while revealing nothing significant about their own family's situations, earn respect and influence that extends far beyond the bathhouse walls. While the nobles bathe and gossip, the afternoon reaches its peak of heat and activity in the Great Dragonpit, where the training of war dragons proceeds according to schedules designed to prepare these creatures for the demands of military service. The training grounds, separate from the main Dragonpit structure, occupy a vast open area where dragons can practice the aerial maneuvers and coordinated attacks that make them such devastating weapons of war. The trainer, a grizzled veteran who has survived 40 years of working with dragons, stands at the center of the training ground with his long pole topped with a colored flag. The pole serves both as a tool for directing the dragon's attention and as a measure of just how close these massive creatures can approach without endangering human handlers. Today's training session involves a formation exercise where multiple dragons must coordinate their movements, approaching a designated target from different angles before breaking away in opposite directions to avoid collision. The dragons participating in this exercise, all young adults in the prime of their strength and speed, launch themselves from their perches with explosive power that shakes the ground. Their wings, spanning 50 feet or more, create winds that flatten vegetation and send dust swirling through the air. They climb rapidly, gaining altitude while the trainer below watches their positions and timing with expert eyes. At his signal, relayed through horn calls that the dragons have been trained to recognize, they begin their coordinated approach. The sight of 6 dragons diving simultaneously toward a single target creates a spectacle that would terrify anyone unfamiliar with such displays. They plummet from the sky, with wings partially folded to increase speed, their mouths opening to reveal the flames they would unleash if this were actual combat rather than training. The target, a stone tower built specifically to withstand repeated dragon attacks, receives the full force of their mock assault, 6 streams of fire converging on its summit with such intensity that the stone begins to glow. At the last possible moment, the dragons break their dives, pulling up with maneuvers that demonstrate the remarkable agility these creatures possess despite their enormous size. The training continues through the afternoon, each exercise building upon previous lessons while introducing new challenges that test the dragon's abilities and their responsiveness to commands. Some exercises focus on precision, hitting specific small targets rather than simply devastating large areas. Others emphasize endurance, maintaining flight for extended periods while carrying maximum loads of armor and equipment. Still others test the dragon's ability to function amid chaos and distraction, fighting effectively even when injured or exhausted or confronted with unexpected situations. The riders, who will eventually mount these dragons in actual combat, observe the training closely, studying their future mounts' capabilities and limitations. These young dragonlords, most in their late teens or early 20s, understand that their lives will depend on the bond they forge with their dragons and their ability to anticipate how their mounts will respond in the confusion of battle. They make notes about individual dragons' tendencies and preferences, learning which creatures favor aggressive frontal attacks and which prefer more subtle approaches, which can maintain longer flights and which tire more quickly, which work well in coordinated groups, and which function better as solitary hunters. As the afternoon training session concludes, and the dragons return to the Dragonpit for rest and feeding, the political heart of the Freehold awakens in the assembly chambers, where the 40 dragonlord families gather to debate policy and make the decisions that govern their vast empire. The assembly building, located on the central island in a position that symbolizes its importance to the entire structure of Valyrian government, stands as one of the city's most impressive architectural achievements. Its design intended to facilitate both the practical requirements of governance and the ceremonial functions that reinforce the legitimacy of dragonlord authority. The chamber itself rises in circular tiers, each tier occupied by a different family, according to a hierarchy that reflects both traditional precedents and recent military or economic achievements. The most prestigious families, including the ancient houses that first bound dragons and established the Freehold, occupy the lowest tier closest to the central speaking floor. Less distinguished families rise progressively higher, their physical elevation inversely proportional to their political importance. The arrangement ensures that the most powerful voices can be easily heard while maintaining visible reminders of status that reinforce social hierarchies. Today's session addresses questions of trade policy with the free cities that have grown wealthy from their positions along major maritime routes. These cities, nominally independent, but in reality subject to Valyrian influence and occasional coercion, seek modifications to the tariff structures that currently channel much of their commercial profit to the Freehold. Representatives from Volantis, the oldest and most powerful of these cities, have presented arguments that reducing tariffs would stimulate trade to the benefit of all parties, increasing overall commercial activity enough that Valyria would profit even from smaller percentages of larger totals. The debate proceeds according to rules developed over millennia, rules that balance free expression with necessary order. Speakers may address the assembly only when recognized by the presiding magistrate, a position that rotates among the most senior dragonlords according to an established schedule. Time limits prevent any single voice from dominating the discussion, while traditional courtesies require that speakers acknowledge the wisdom and honor of those whose positions they dispute. The formal language of debate, conducted entirely in High Valyrian, elevates the discourse above mere squabbling while obscuring the naked power calculations that motivate many interventions. Lord Aelor of House Belaris, speaking for those families whose wealth derives primarily from direct trade with foreign territories, argues passionately for maintaining current tariff levels. His reasoning emphasizes both principle and pragmatism. Reducing tariffs would signal weakness and invite further demands for concessions, while the economic projections offered by Volantis rely on assumptions about increased trade volume that may prove overly optimistic. Furthermore, he suggests, the free cities have become perhaps too wealthy and independent, and policies that reduce their resources while maintaining Valyrian prosperity serve the long-term interests of the Freehold. The counter-argument, presented by Lord Vaymond of House Coharis, whose family maintains extensive business relationships with Volantine merchants, emphasizes the benefits of cooperation over coercion. He argues that the free city's prosperity ultimately enhances Valyrian power by creating wealthy trading partners who purchase goods and services from freehold producers. Punitive tariffs that impoverish these cities reduce their ability to consume Valyrian products, while generating resentment that might eventually manifest in rebellion or alliances with enemies. Better, he suggests, to maintain the free cities as prosperous subjects whose loyalty stems from mutual benefit rather than fear. The debate extends through the afternoon as various speakers offer modifications to these basic positions, suggesting compromises that might satisfy competing interests while advancing their own family's advantages. Some propose differential tariffs that reward cities demonstrating particular loyalty while punishing those that show signs of independence. Others suggest temporary tariff reductions contingent on meeting specific trade volume targets, creating incentives for the free cities to expand their commercial activities. Still others advocate for maintaining current policies while investigating the Volantine representatives for possible corruption or exaggeration of their city's economic distress. The voting process, when the assembly finally exhausts the arguments and calls for decision, reveals the complex web of alliances and obligations that structure Valyrian politics. Families vote not only according to their own interests, but also in fulfillment of promises made to allied houses, or in opposition to rivals whose positions they would reflexively contradict regardless of the specific issue. The final tally shows a narrow majority favoring the status quo, though enough support exists for tariff modification that the issue will likely return in future sessions as circumstances change and alliances shift. As the assembly concludes its afternoon business and the dragonlords disperse to their estates, the evening transformation of the city begins. The magical lights that have dimmed during the bright afternoon hours gradually increase their intensity, creating illumination that allows activity to continue long after natural darkness would force cessation in less sophisticated cities. The streets fill with people seeking entertainment and social interaction, the oppressive heat of afternoon giving way to more comfortable temperatures as volcanic vents reduce their output, and evening breezes drift down from the mountains. The evening meal in noble households represents the day's most elaborate culinary production, an opportunity to display both wealth and refined taste through the selection and preparation of exotic foods. In the dining hall of House Targaryen, servants arrange the table with a precision that reflects years of training in proper service. The plates, crafted from silver mined beneath the 14 flames and worked by master smiths into forms that combine utility with artistic beauty, are positioned according to strict rules about spacing and alignment. The goblets, carved from single pieces of crystal and enchanted to maintain the perfect temperature for whatever beverage they contain, catch the magical light and scatter it in rainbow patterns across the table's surface. The meal itself consists of a dozen courses, each designed to complement and contrast with those that precede and follow it. The first course features delicate raw fish, sliced so thin that light passes through it, arranged on plates with edible flowers and dressed with citrus juices that cure the flesh. This gives way to soups of remarkable complexity, their broths requiring days of careful preparation to extract every nuance of flavor from bones, vegetables, and aromatics. Then come the roasted meats, duck, lamb, and boar, each prepared using techniques that render the flesh succulent and tender while creating crispy exteriors that provide textural contrast. Between the savory courses, servants offer palate cleansers, shaved ice flavored with fruit essences, or delicate pastries that dissolve on the tongue like sweet snow. The dessert courses begin with fruits, some grown in the estate's own gardens, and others imported from distant lands at considerable expense. These progress to confections of increasing elaboration, spun sugar sculptures that recreate famous dragons in miniature, or cakes whose layers conceal surprising flavors and textures, or frozen creams infused with exotic spices that numb the tongue while delighting the palate. The dinner conversation among the family members serves purposes beyond mere entertainment. Gaiman reports on the afternoon's assembly session, analyzing the implications of various votes and the shifting alliances they reveal. His wife shares intelligence gathered at the bathhouse, offering insights into rival families' situations that might present opportunities or threats. Their children contribute their own observations from the day's activities, learning through participation how to navigate the complex social and political landscape they will one day inherit. After the meal concludes, the family retires to a garden terrace where the cooling evening air makes outdoor comfort possible. Here, with the magical lights of the city spreading before them, like a field of stars reflected in the volcanic lake below, they continue their conversation in more relaxed tones. Musicians, slaves trained from childhood in the performance of traditional Valyrian instruments, provide background music that enhances the ambiance without overwhelming conversation. The melodies, ancient and complex, evoke both the glory of the Freehold and the sorrows that even the most privileged lives contain. In the lower city, The evening brings different entertainments to different classes of people. The public houses, where common citizens gather to drink and socialize, fill with workers seeking respite from the day's labors. These establishments, though crude compared to noble dining halls, nonetheless provide genuine comfort and community to people whose lives offer few other pleasures. The ale flows freely, loosening tongues and creating camaraderie among people who might otherwise remain strangers. The conversations touch on topics both mundane and profound. The day's work and its frustrations, family concerns, and neighborhood gossip, but also larger questions about the justice of the social order and the possibility of different futures. The brothels of the entertainment quarter, staffed largely by slaves whose beauty or skills make them more valuable in this capacity than in simple labor, attract both common citizens with coins to spare and nobles seeking diversions beyond what their own households can provide. These establishments range from squalid rooms where desperate men seek moments of contact purchased for a few coppers, to elaborate pleasure houses where every desire can be accommodated for those willing to pay premium prices. The slaves who work in these places endure fates that vary from merely unpleasant to actively traumatic, their lives entirely subject to the whims of customers and the calculations of owners who see them only as profit-generating assets. The theaters, where plays and performances provide entertainment that combines artistry with social commentary, occupy a unique position in Valyrian culture. The plays performed here, while subject to censorship that prevents direct criticism of the dragonlord families or the political system, nonetheless explore themes that resonate with audiences across the social spectrum. Tales of ancient heroes and their triumphs speak to desires for glory and significance. Comedies that mock the pretensions of social climbers provide safe outlet for resentments about inequality. Tragedies that explore the consequences of hubris and excessive ambition offer warnings wrapped in entertainment. Tonight's performance at the Grand Theater features a classic work from the golden age of Valyrian drama, a tragedy that tells the story of a dragonlord who became so convinced of his own supremacy that he challenged the gods themselves. The play, well known to educated audiences, but containing sufficient spectacle to entertain even those unfamiliar with its nuances, unfolds with the inevitability of a volcanic eruption. The protagonist's pride leads him to increasingly reckless actions, ignoring the warnings of wiser counselors and dismissing the omens that predict disaster. The climax arrives when his greatest dragon, symbol of his power and instrument of his will, turns on him during a ritual that goes catastrophically wrong, consuming him in flames while his enemies triumph and his family falls to ruin. The audience, composed of citizens from across the social spectrum who can afford the ticket prices, receives the performance with varying reactions. Some see only the entertainment value, enjoying the spectacular staging and the actors' passionate deliveries. Others recognize the deeper themes about the limits of power and the dangers of assuming that present success guarantees future safety. A few, mostly those with education in philosophy and history, understand that the play obliquely comments on current political situations, its ancient setting providing cover for observations that would be dangerous if stated directly. As full darkness settles over the city and the evening entertainment reaches its peak, other activities proceed in locations hidden from casual observation. In the basement chambers of certain noble estates, practitioners of blood magic conduct rituals that mainstream fire mages would condemn as corrupt and dangerous. These sorcerers, operating at the boundaries of acceptable practice, experiment with techniques that promise greater power at costs that include human sacrifice and the corruption of the practitioner's own essence. Tonight, in a chamber beneath the estate of a minor but ambitious noble family, 3 blood mages gather to attempt a working that they hope will grant them insights into future events. The chamber's walls bear inscriptions in languages that predate even High Valyrian, words whose meanings have been lost, but whose power apparently persists. The floor features a complex diagram drawn in substances that include blood, ground gems, and powders made from dried organs harvested from various creatures, both mundane and magical. The ritual requires a sacrifice, and the terrified slave who has been selected for this purpose understands that his death approaches, though he cannot comprehend the purposes it will serve. The mages begin their chanting, their voices blending in harmonies that seem to come from throats not entirely human. They move through the chamber, following patterns dictated by the floor diagram, their gestures precise and their timing synchronized with inhuman precision. The temperature in the room increases despite the absence of any visible fire source, and shadows gather in corners that should be well lit by the torches burning on the walls. At the ritual's climax, one of the mages produces a knife of Valyrian steel, its blade inscribed with symbols that writhe and shift when viewed directly. He approaches the bound slave with the detachment of a butcher approaching livestock, raising the knife while continuing the chant that has built to a crescendo. The blade descends, the blood flows, and the slave's final scream cuts off abruptly as his life force is channeled into the working that the mages have constructed. The visions that follow, experienced simultaneously by all 3 mages, show fragments of possible futures too disjointed to create clear narratives. They see fire and darkness, cities burning, and mountains erupting, dragons falling from ash-choked skies, and civilizations collapsing into ruin. They see the Freehold continuing in glory for thousands more years, spreading its power to encompass the entire world. They see both outcomes and countless variations between, the visions contradicting each other in ways that make interpretation impossible. As the ritual concludes and the visions fade, the mages find themselves more confused than enlightened, their sacrifice yielding ambiguous results that could support any interpretation one might prefer. Yet one image recurs in all their visions with enough consistency to suggest genuine prophetic significance, a massive explosion of volcanic fury that dwarfs anything in historical record, an eruption so catastrophic that it obliterates the Freehold entirely and transforms the peninsula into a hellscape where nothing can survive. This vision disturbs the mages despite their general skepticism about prophecy, for it arrives with a weight and clarity that mere imagination rarely achieves. They agree to conduct further rituals, to investigate whether this represents genuine warning or merely their own subconscious fears given form by the magic they have invoked. In another part of the city, entirely unaware of the blood magic being practiced in secret chambers, the faceless men maintain their presence in disguise so perfect that none suspect their true nature or purposes. These servants of the many-faced God, dedicated to the proposition that death represents the only true God and that all others are merely aspects of this fundamental force, move through Valyrian society, gathering information and waiting for the contracts that will justify the killings they will eventually perpetrate. One such agent, currently assuming the identity of a successful merchant in the slave trade, sits in a wine house near the harbor district, observing and listening while maintaining the persona that has taken him months to establish. The conversations swirling around him touch on the usual topics: business opportunities and political gossip, family troubles and personal grievances. He files away the information that might prove useful, noting the names of individuals who express dissatisfaction with the current order, or who possess knowledge that others might wish to suppress. The faceless man's presence in Valyria serves multiple purposes. His organization maintains agents throughout the known world, gathering intelligence that enables them to fulfill contracts with maximum efficiency while minimizing their own exposure to danger. But beyond these practical considerations, the faceless men nurture a particular hatred for Valyria and the dragonlord families, viewing them as the ultimate expression of the tyranny and oppression that their god exists to oppose. They remember that their order was founded by slaves in the mines beneath the 14 flames, desperate people who prayed for death to release them from suffering, and received instead the knowledge and power to release others. Tonight, the faceless man receives a message delivered through channels so subtle that even he does not know who initiated the contact. The message requests a meeting in 3 days' time at a location known only to members of his organization, a meeting that will apparently present opportunities of unusual significance. He acknowledges the message according to the protocols his training has ingrained, then returns to his role as a merchant, discussing the prices of slaves and the difficulties of maintaining proper discipline among particularly troublesome stock. As midnight approaches, the city gradually settles into its quieter rhythms, though true darkness never descends on Valyria. The magical lights continue their glow at reduced intensity, providing enough illumination that the streets remain navigable throughout the night. The nighttime population emerges. Bakers who begin work in the hours before dawn so their bread will be fresh for the morning markets. Street cleaners who remove the day's accumulated filth. Guards who patrol the wealthier districts, protecting noble property from the criminals who prowl for opportunities. In the Dragonpit, the great beasts settle into their sleeping places, their deep breathing creating currents of warm air that flow through the vast chamber. Some dragons sleep lightly, one eye occasionally opening to scan their surroundings with the eternal vigilance that even domestication has not eliminated. Others slumber deeply, their sides rising and falling in slow rhythms that could measure out the passage of hours. The younger dragons, still possessing the restless energy of youth, shift and turn in their sleep, occasionally sending up small puffs of flame as they dream of whatever occupies dragon minds in the realm beyond waking. The dragon keepers who maintain the night watch move quietly among their charges, checking on each dragon's condition, ensuring that the temperature and ventilation systems function properly, listening for any sounds that might indicate disease or distress. This is peaceful work compared to the frenetic activity of feeding time or training sessions, but it requires constant attention nonetheless. A dragon in distress can quickly become a dragon in a rage, and in the confined spaces of the Dragonpit, such situations can escalate into catastrophes that cost lives and damage infrastructure. In the noble estates, the families retire to their sleeping chambers after evening entertainments conclude. Servants bank the fires, secure the doors and windows, and withdraw to their own quarters leaving their masters in the privacy that rank and wealth ensure. Some nobles fall asleep quickly, exhausted by the day's activities and secure in the comfort of their beds. Others lie awake for hours, their minds churning with the political calculations, personal concerns, and general anxieties that accompany life at the pinnacle of the world's most powerful civilization. Young Daenerys Targaryen lies in her bed, unable to sleep despite her exhaustion, her mind still reeling from the vision she experienced during her morning bath. The images of fire and destruction persist behind her closed eyelids, refusing to fade as dreams normally do upon waking. She has experienced prophetic visions before, fragmentary glimpses of possible futures that sometimes manifest and sometimes do not. But this vision carries a weight and certainty that her previous experiences have lacked, a sense of inevitable catastrophe approaching, like a wave building far out at sea, currently invisible but gathering force that will eventually manifest with devastating power. She considers whether to tell her father about this vision, whether to risk the mockery and dismissal that prophets often receive when they speak of disasters that comfortable people prefer not to contemplate. But something holds her back, some instinct that her warnings would fall on deaf ears, that the Freehold's power and prosperity have created such confidence in its permanence that no one would seriously entertain suggestions of its vulnerability. She resolves to watch and wait, to see if subsequent visions provide clarity about whether this future can be prevented or merely represents one possibility among many that may never manifest. In the mines beneath the 14 flames, the night shift descends into the depths to continue the work that never truly stops. These slaves, fresh or at least less exhausted than those who have spent the day underground, carry their tools and torches into tunnels that extend for miles beneath the mountains. The work proceeds more slowly at night due to reduced visibility and increased fatigue, but the overseers drive their charges nonetheless, knowing that the demand for precious metals and dragon eggs never diminishes regardless of what time the clock shows. The volcanic forces that lurk beneath the Freehold never rest, never acknowledge human schedules or concerns. Deep below the mining operations, in chambers that no human has ever seen and never will, pressures build according to geological processes that operate on timescales far beyond human comprehension. The magical containment systems that the fire mages have laboriously constructed and maintained for thousands of years continue their work, channeling volcanic energies in ways that prevent catastrophic eruptions while allowing controlled releases that the Valyrians have learned to exploit. But these systems, sophisticated as they are, depend on maintenance and monitoring that require knowledge, resources, and attention that future generations might not provide. The fire mages who understand the deepest principles of volcanic containment have not adequately documented their knowledge or trained sufficient apprentices to ensure continuity. The political factions within the Freehold sometimes prioritize short-term advantages over long-term stability, diverting resources from maintenance to more immediately visible projects. And the sheer hubris of a civilization that has never experienced fundamental catastrophe creates dangerous complacency about threats that seem theoretical and distant. As the night deepens toward its darkest hour before the return of dawn, Valyria rests in the confidence of its power and the security of its traditions. The city's inhabitants, from the greatest dragonlords to the most wretched slaves, exist within a civilization that has endured for thousands of years and shows every sign of continuing for thousands more. The dragons sleep in their pits. The fires burn in their forges. The magical lights glow with their eternal radiance, and the 14 flames exhale their constant breath of smoke and steam into the night sky. None among them realize that this way of life, this magnificent civilization, built on slavery and sustained by dragonfire, exists on a geological and moral precipice from which it will eventually fall. The day that has just concluded represents merely one among thousands that have preceded it, and hundreds that will follow before the doom arrives to obliterate everything the Valyrians have built. But for now, in this moment of midnight stillness, the Freehold seems eternal, its power absolute, its future assured by the strength of its dragons and the genius of its people. The volcanic lake that surrounds the city reflects the magical lights from thousands of buildings, creating a doubled image of impossible beauty. The stars above compete with the lights below, and for a moment, the boundary between earth and sky seems to dissolve, creating the illusion that the city floats in an endless void of light and darkness intermingled. This is Valyria at its height, the greatest civilization the world has ever known, a place where magic and technology combine to create wonders that will never be matched or replicated. And as the city sleeps, as the dragons dream their unknowable dreams, and the slaves endure their suffering, and the nobles rest secure in their power, the slow countdown to the doom continues its inexorable progress toward the moment when fire will consume fire, when the civilization built on volcanic fury will be obliterated by the very forces it believed itself to have mastered. But that moment lies years in the future, invisible to those who live in the present, and so the city rests in peace, unaware of the catastrophe approaching like an inevitable tide. The night watch continues its rounds. The bakers knead their dough. The guards patrol their routes. The dragons breathe their deep rumbling breaths. And far beneath the mountains, in the darkness that no light penetrates, the geological forces build their terrible pressure, waiting for the day when human magic will no longer suffice to contain them. When the 14 flames will erupt simultaneously in fury that will reshape the world and end the age of dragons in fire and darkness and the screams of millions consumed by the doom of their own making. This is a day in Old Valyria, one day among thousands, distinguished from its predecessors and successors only by the particular configurations of human drama and natural process that characterize its unique moment in time. Tomorrow will bring similar patterns. The dragons will be fed, the slaves will toil, the nobles will scheme, the merchants will trade, the forges will burn, and the city will continue its existence in the shadow of the 14 flames, confident in its power and blind to its vulnerability, living on borrowed time in the greatest civilization that the world will ever see.